Good to be back. We had a good plan, Jackie and I. If you're new to us today, my name's Eric, and I'm one of the pastors here. And the lady who prayed, her name is Jackie. We belong together. And our plan was, after the Sunday before Christmas, was to take the next few weeks off and really just have a good time. And sometimes life does some things that you don't expect. And December 22nd of this year, Jackie's mom graduated to heaven, made the transition, had her memorial on the 26th. December 22nd of 2018, her dad, he passed, and on December the 26th, 2018, we had his memorial service. And I told Jackie they did it to ruin my Christmas. You can laugh, folks. We're okay. They're both in heaven. We're good. But it made a difference in our season once again. But it's good to be back. How about being godly? Guy can preach, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And it's always a privilege for me to be able to go away and know that He's going to protect what we have here and give you the good news. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. 3 weeks ago, I started talking about how small things can make a really big difference. And I'm going to talk to you about that for some time to come. If the flu bug was the size of a grapefruit, you probably wouldn't get it, would you? But it's not. You can't see it. Some of you are experiencing it today. It's in our home. So if you want to give your condolences to Jackie, probably should do it across the room. I don't know how she got it. I gave it to her. So if you want to say welcome back to me, do it from across the room. We both have that tiny little thing I guess it's the crud bug. I don't know exactly what it is, but either way. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and they said they had gone to a hotel and got bed bugs, bitten by bed bugs. And I know the name of the hotel, but I'm not going to tell you. Not because I don't want you to know, because if they see this, I don't want a lawsuit or anything. But bed bugs, you can't see them apparently, but pack a big punch. If you don't believe small things can make a big difference, ask one of our elders, Lynn Kuntz, or my wife, Jackie. They both have Lyme's disease. You know how you get that? Not even by a regular sized tick. It's a smaller than a regular size, called a deer tick. You can barely see it. Very, very deadly stuff. Just nasty, nasty stuff. Not just things like that can make a big difference. An angry word or an angry phrase. Even when you speak it to someone you care about, it makes a big difference. Because it's kind of hard. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Once it's spilt, it's spilt. Once it's out, it's out. And it's kind of hard to get it back. But here's what I want you to walk with me in for however long we're talking about this. This works for good too. Good, small things can make a really big, good difference in a person's life. A kind word. So many people could use a kind word today. You ought to try it. Just a kind phrase. Sometimes people they just need to be hugged. To feel the warmth of another human being, because they don't get that much. Or just a simple prayer. Where you don't just say, I'm going to pray for you, but you stop right there and you say, let me pray for you. Even if you're not one of those real good prayers, it's okay. You can say a simple prayer. A smiling Gumby. You don't get that one, do you? By show of hands, who knows who Gumby is? Okay, what's his horse's name? Pokey. Yeah, a friend of mine mentioned that a couple of months ago. I hadn't thought about Gumby since I was a kid. Now, you're going to get some good stuff out of this message today. Probably no Bible, but we're going to talk some Gumby. A friend of mine mentioned Gumby. Hadn't thought about it for years. Went on Amazon. Found me a Gumby and a Pokey. Little bitty statues. They're right in my office, sitting right beside my computer. You know why? because they never stop smiling. They don't. You can't wipe the smile off of Gumby's face with an eraser. They're always smiling. Pokey smiling. And every time I feel down and I'm sitting at my computer, right there someone's smiling at me. That might sound silly to you. That has meant a lot to me lately because Gumby never stops. And sometimes we just need to see a smile, a simple word from the Bible. I mean, if I ask for a show of hands and I want on this one, but Psalm 23:1 that we talked about for so long last year, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's such a simple sentence, but it changed many, many lives through this ministry. We've heard from online people who are watching live today, and that simple word from God, that simple verse, it's changed a lot of lives. Years ago, there was a book that came out. And it was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, because it's all small stuff. Now, if you want to find it, you can find it in the self-help section of the bookstore, or you can find it in that section on Amazon. But I'm telling you, I'm not recommending that book for you to read. It's not because it's a bad book. I used to read a lot of self-help books until it finally dawned on me that self-help wasn't what I needed. I mean, I can't help myself but so much. What I needed somebody way smarter than self. I needed a God help book. So I started looking and I found a whole series of God help books. The first one in the series is called Genesis. The last one in the series is called Revelation. And there's 64 books in between. And when I started really focusing on those 66 books in the series, that's what started to change my life. So the man who wrote the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, because it's all small stuff. The book is just okay, but the title stinks. It just stinks. Now, the first part's good. Don't sweat the small stuff. I agree. Part 2 is not true. He says don't sweat the small stuff because it's all small stuff. That is just not true. Not true at all. You've heard someone say, stop making a mountain out of a molehill. I agree with that. That just means don't make little worries bigger than they are. But listen, we shouldn't make molehills out of mountains either. Sometimes we blow things off that really shouldn't be blown off at all. They're really big in life. When God does something big for you, don't just blow it off. Don't just dismiss it and move on. Thank God for it. When something good happens in your life, thank God for it and then tell somebody about it. Thank Him again and tell people again about it. Look, I know a lot of believers who say, I want to be a good witness for God. You know the best witness you can be for God? You don't have to preach a sermon. You don't have to show off anything. Just go tell people what God has done for you. You don't have to tell them what He'll do for them because you don't know what He's going to do for them. You don't have to tell it. All you got to do is tell people, here's what God has done in my life. It'll be the best witness for God that you've ever been. Go to the doctor. Maybe something's seriously wrong. And through the course of events, doctor looks at you later and says, I think you're completely well. That's a big deal. That's not small stuff. Thank God for it and then go tell someone. I've watched a few of you, and I haven't watched all of you, but I've watched a few of you look for the mate God has prepared for you. And you finally find her. You finally find him. That's a big deal. Thank God for that. Tell somebody about it. Some of you thought, I'll never get out of debt. It's just too big. But because you got disciplined recently, or because you started becoming a cheerful giver that we've taught you about, the debt's gone or it's almost gone. Don't hold on to that. You might think, well, that's a small thing. No, that's a big deal. Thank God for that and tell someone. Some of you have thought you were on the verge of divorce. Now, this I know is true. Some have thought they were on the verge of divorce. The guy that was on that video, Roger Worley, he and his wife talked to a lot of people who feel like they're on the verge of a marriage breaking apart or just that their marriage needs a tune-up. And what they discover in talking to this couple is that their marriage can get so much better than they ever believed possible. And you might think, well, it's just a small conversation. It can change generations in a family. When a family who thought they were going to break apart stay together. No, you shouldn't sweat the small stuff. But don't believe it's all small. Never believe it's all small stuff. When I was 18, I can still remember that. Why you think that's funny? I still remember being 18. I didn't sweat much of anything because I didn't really care about much. I was going to college, and my dad was paying for it. It was awesome. I didn't have to do anything, so I just didn't sweat it. I didn't sweat bad grades. Didn't matter to me. My dad's paying. Until my dad came into my bedroom one summer, and he said, look, I'm not going to pay for you to goof off anymore. And I thought, I believe this old guy's serious. I mean, I couldn't imagine. What's the matter with this man? I had no direction. I had very little ambition. But I kept hearing people say these things in the church that I attended, and some family members. They would kind of whisper it. They would say, you know, I think Eric might make a good minister. And I was always thinking, well, I'm not going to sweat that because that ain't happening ever. That is not going to happen. That is not in the cards. But I did start to sweat a little bit because my dad helped me to realize you are not going to be 18 forever. And he helped me to realize that very well. I don't know what the catchphrase is for the young guys today, but when I was 18 years old, the catchphrase was this: I'm trying to find myself. Some of you remember that. Maybe it's the same thing now. My dad helped me out with that a lot because I told Dad, I'm trying to find myself. And he said, that's great, son. While you're looking, how about getting a job? There you go. We got some parents of 18-year-olds in here. Or 30-year-olds. That's a different message. I kept hearing in the back of my head, Eric would make a good minister. So here's what I did. I found a good minister. And I went and talked to him. He happens to be my brother Bob. He was the best good minister I knew at the time. He's still the best good minister I know today. I think he's probably the best in the world. I'm a little bit biased about that. And I went and I talked to my brother who was in the ministry, and he told me to do the very thing I'm telling you to do today. And he told me to do the thing I'm going to keep telling you over and over and over. My brother looked at me. I'm 18 years old. I'm in college. Things aren't going well. Well, they're not going well. And my brother said, Eric, do something small. I'm like, no, man, if I'm going to get in this, I want to be all in. I want to be like you. He said, Eric, do something small. He said, take the first step. And just see how you like it. He said, go back to school, go back to college, and take a religion course. And it didn't matter to me. Dad's still paying. I get one more shot at this. And everything else I took, I failed, so it really didn't matter. So I took a religion course, New Testament course. I didn't know anything about it. I knew that the New Testament was after the Old Testament. I knew that much. I knew that when you went to church, sometimes you hear stuff out of it. So I took a religion course. Never forget the professor, Loy Witherspoon. Had no idea when I walked into his class, 200 other students, that one day he would be instrumental in getting me into Duke University. Had no idea, looking at this guy, that one day he would change my life. So I go into that course, finish up that course, I made an A. I mean, the only A I had ever made, first grade, dusting erasers. I got an A. It was awesome. I get an A. I did something small. I get an A. So I go to my brother and I said, man, I got an A. Never had an A in my life. He said, how does it feel? I said, it feels good. He said, do something small. No, man, I'm ready for ministry. I need a church. I'm ready to go. He said, I'll do something small. Take another religion course. So I took another religion course. Made an A. I don't make A's, but I made an A. And then I went and found some smart people, smarter than me, wiser than me. And I started talking to them. I started praying about this thing, for the first time in my life, other than now I lay me down to sleep and God bless this food I'm about to receive. I just started talking to God about it, and God's slick. When you start doing small things in the right way, God's pretty slick. By the time I finished taking all the small steps, I was in the ministry. Full time in the ministry. And I did not even know how it happened. There were no bright lights. There were no billboards. There was no cheering crowd. Just one small step at a time. I'm telling you, small steps can make the biggest difference in your life. And today is a good day to start. You're going to work. Now, this is good stuff right here. Well, some of the other stuff was good too, but this is really good. You're going to work one of three plans, and I'm going to give you those three plans. You're going to work God's plan, you're going to work your plan, or you're going to work somebody else's plan for you. Okay? Right there. Those are the three plans that you have in life. Memorize them. Write them down. Look at them. Decide. See, God's plan is going to be the slowest plan, most likely. It's going to be the most methodical plan. At times it may be the most boring plan. But I'm telling you, plan number one is the most reliable plan you will ever do. You've heard of Moses. Even if you're not a Christian, you've probably heard of Moses. You can read about him starting in the book of Exodus, in the second book of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus. Well, Moses, he wasn't always Moses. Not the Moses we know. Took Moses doing small steps to become the Moses we know. Took him 80 years. 80 years of faithful small steps to become the Moses we know. He didn't just wander around for those 80 years. A lot of stuff was going on. Moses, when he was a little baby, he grew up in the house of an Egyptian king, and Moses was a Hebrew. They're natural enemies. But he grows up in the house of a king because the king's daughter, who couldn't have babies, she found Moses, and she kind of brought him in the home as her own. So he grows up as a foreigner in a foreign land. Nobody knows who Moses is. But one day he got really mad at an Egyptian and he killed him. He took a stick and beat him to death. Now this is Moses the murderer. You don't hear a lot about him. This is not Moses, the guy who's going to become the greatest leader in the history of the world outside of Jesus. He's the murderer. So he runs and hides for 40 years. See, I wanted to take one class and be a minister. Moses is running and for his life for 40 years. He's still not the Moses we know today. Goes out in the desert, meets a woman out there, likes what he sees, gets married to her. Gets to know her dad a little bit. Her dad hires him. Now he's an assistant shepherd. So now we got Moses the murderer, Moses the son-in-law, Moses the assistant shepherd. It is certainly not Moses, the greatest leader in the history of the world. God took Moses in small steps through 80 years of life, one step at a time, before he was ready to be used in a big way. God called Moses to lead 2 million people. Nobody else has ever pulled this off. He called Moses to lead 2 million people out of 400 years of slavery. He called Moses to do some of the Bible's greatest miracles. I think about parting the Red Sea. He called Moses to go onto the mountain and record the 10 commandments that the whole world knows today. And many of us operate off of those commandments. And it only took him 3/4 of his life to get there. So let me ask you this, what's your hurry? Well, Eric, the clock's ticking. What's your hurry? I'm not as young as I used to be. What's your hurry? God can do what God's going to do. Small things make a huge difference. So I'm going to be talking to you for a while. I'm going to be encouraging you to think small and do small. And I know that doesn't sound like the American dream today. You're supposed to dream big, aren't you? You're supposed to think big. You're supposed to talk big. You're supposed to act big. I don't think so. I think if we can get you thinking small and acting small and doing small, I think it's going to get you to where God wants you to be, whether you are 8 years old sitting in this room or 98. I think that can happen if we just think small. See, God wants to do the same thing for you that He did for Moses. Not lead 2 million people out of slavery, but He wants you to do what He wants you to do. But here's the way God set it all up. God never set up a system where a baby becomes an adult overnight. Now, if that sounds simple, it is. But I want you to think about it. It's small steps taken in the right direction. That's how a baby becomes an adult. Now, sometimes they have to take some steps in the wrong direction and get a little beat up, get a little bruised up, fall and hit their head, feel a little pain, get some discipline. But that's what makes them into a good adult. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. You get to decide. You get to decide what steps you are going to take, whether it's for God, for you, or for someone else. Maybe you've been deciding on the wrong stuff. Yep, it happens. Maybe you've been walking in the wrong direction. It happens. Maybe you've been hanging out with the wrong people. Well, today's your day. I want you to believe that. I want you to accept that. Today, what's the date of today? January. Yeah, I didn't hear you. I'm getting old. Thank you. Thank you. God can use old ears, right? I hope so. That's all He's got to work with here. January 12th. Today's the day you can decide. You can decide to start taking small steps in a different direction. But here's the biggest thing I would encourage you to decide today, and I'm having to decide some things on my own with this. Here's what I would encourage you to decide. Decide that about that old life, the old direction, I've had enough. I mean, can you imagine if you would just decide that today? Nothing. If you didn't even decide what you're going to eat for lunch. If you would just decide about that old life, I have had enough. Then things will start to change. Now, here's what some of you are going to say. Probably not to my face, but you'll think it. You'll think, Eric, it's too late for me. I've messed up too much stuff. Well, when was that? And it was just yesterday. Okay, that's gone. Or it was, man, last year I just did some things that is still haunting me. Or a decade ago, 40 years ago, I did some things that are still haunting me. They're gone. Remember when we talked about Psalm 23:5? When you make the Lord your shepherd and you look in your rearview mirror, it says goodness and mercy follows me. Some of you born-again people are still looking in your rearview mirror, seeing junk that happened to you yesterday, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. What in the world are you thinking? Today you can decide, I've had enough of that. The Lord is my shepherd. And tomorrow when I look in the rearview mirror, I'm going to see goodness and mercy following me because I'm going to take some steps today to let God know I've had it with my past. And I am not going to go back there again. How do you do that? It's very simple. Very simple. Not easy, but it's simple. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. This is a great sentence or two to memorize. Don't get tired of doing what's right. In due season, you will reap a harvest of blessing. So just don't give up. Boy, that's it. Ding, 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 ding. That's it. This Thursday, I get to go for my annual physical. I can't wait. because I know what he's going to tell me. You know, I ate too much. I did. And I know he's going to have he's going to have a talk with me about that. But here's what happens to me. Maybe it happens to you too. I make the decision, today I've had enough. I'm going to be different. And I can do it through Wednesday. I can. I'm a very disciplined human being. I can eat carrots for 3 days. But then I see one of you guys on the street and you say, let's go into Red's, let's have a donut. Well, I know Jesus would want me to do that because of you, see? My problem is I just haven't decided yet. I'd rather carry it around with me, apparently. But the best things start to happen in your life with small steps. Don't get tired of doing what's right. Paul writes in Galatians 6:9, in due season you will reap a harvest of blessing, so just don't give up. See, I want to go to bed tonight, and I want to wake up in the morning, and I want to put on the 32 jeans I wore a year ago, 30 years ago. I tried a decade, I tried 20. The math just happened really fast. 40 years ago, okay. I feel better. That's a confession. Look, take small steps. Just take small steps. And it is hard sometimes. Everybody wants to go to bed tonight and be completely different tomorrow. It happened to Paul in Acts chapter 9. Paul, he's a bad man. He's really coming down on the church. He's killing Christians. He's wiping out churches. And in Acts 9:3 it says, now as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him, and falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Now this is the key in verse 6. Jesus said, but rise and enter the city, and you will be told what you're to do. Paul didn't realize that he was going to become Paul and write most of the New Testament and change the lives of countless people for thousands of years. He didn't understand that. All he knew was he needed to take a small step and just go to the city and listen. All he did was decide, I'm going to follow what God says follow. Now don't think that Paul goes to the city and he saw one day, and the next day he comes out the apostle writing letters to the churches. Paul did what God told him to do, and it still took him 14 years. 14 years. But he just kept going at it day after day, small daily steps for God in the right direction. So maybe you feel prompted to do something. I don't know what it might be, but maybe you feel prompted to do something. Now, if you're prompted to go and punch somebody in the face, not of God. Nope, not of God. If you feel prompted to call somebody up and ream them out and say some bad things, if that was for me, just tell them I'm not here. Well, don't tell them I'm not here. That would be a lie, and of course I wouldn't do that. Where are we? But if you feel prompted to do something good, don't wait. Just decide to go do it. Maybe you are going to feel prompted to say something positive to a negative person. You know, you've tried saying negative for negative, and that hasn't worked, so try saying something positive to them. Take a small step. Maybe you've been feeling prompted to make some amends with another person that you've had an issue with. Then make the amends. Maybe you feel prompted to ask someone to forgive you. Or maybe you feel prompted to extend forgiveness to someone else. Maybe it's to make a phone call. Maybe it's to make a visit. And you might say, oh, that's not a big thing. I can get to that later. You know, they don't really care what I have to say. I don't want to bother this person. No, God's saying, take the step. Just take a small step in the right direction. Doesn't have to be a big leap of faith. Just a kind word, small gesture, a thank you, or you're doing a great job. Small things make a big difference. Moses learned to trust God with the smalls. Because of that, God says, okay, I'm going to give you some bigger things now. That's the way God works. He leads his people out of Egypt. They're no longer slaves, but they're sitting at the Red Sea, and the bad guys are bearing down on them. They're going to get them and take them back into slavery. And the only way they could get away is if something happened that never happened before, that an entire sea just separates. And here's what God said. God said, Moses, I want you to go over to the sea, and I want you to take your stick. This was a walking stick. And he said, I want you to hold it up. All Moses did, he just walked over to the sea, just like you would with a stick in your hand, and he held it up, and the entire Red Sea said, it parts. It divided. 2 million people of Israel went through on dry land, and the sea crushed in on the enemy and killed them all. All because Moses just held up his stick. Because that's what God said do. In Exodus chapter 17, they made it through the Red Sea. They're out in the desert. It's hot. They don't have anything to drink. People start to complain. People say, we're going to die if we don't get something to drink. So what does God do? God said, Moses, there's a rock over there. I want you to take your stick. That was some kind of stick. Actually, it was just a stick. He said, I want you to take a stick, go over there to that rock, and hit the rock. Now, that sounds like the dumbest thing you've ever heard. But Moses had learned over 80 years, just trust God with the smalls. When you're prompted to do something, just do it. So he's prompted by God, go over there and hit that rock with a stick. Moses goes over and hits that rock with a stick. Water comes gushing out, and 2 million people can go to that well and drink because Moses hit the rock. So for the next while, I'm going to show you Bible story after Bible story, truth after truth, scripture after scripture, story after story, where God uses the smallest things to make the biggest difference. You see, the same God that we read about in the Bible, He's the same God that can be in your life today. He's the same God that will prompt you to do the smalls today. He hasn't changed the way He does things. He will take the smalls, the smallest things, and make some really big things happen. So if you've heard this message today and you said, I think I can do one thing today. I think I can decide I've had enough. I've had enough of the old way, and I'm going to be different. Then you keep coming back, and we're going to keep talking about this until it gets on the inside of us. And when this truth gets on the inside of us and we start taking these small steps, doing these small things, making these small comments through God, this place and all who come, it's going to be incredible. Some incredible things are going to happen in your life through the smalls. Let's pray. God, I'm psyched up today for those who've had it. They've had enough. They've had enough of the world telling them what they ought to think about. They've had enough being afraid of what they see in the newspapers and people in leadership acting like anything but Christ followers. They've had enough ranting on social media because that doesn't do any good. They've had enough trying to figure out a wayward child who won't answer their phone calls and won't come home. They're tired of watching their parents fight tooth and nail, wondering when someone's going to get hurt, wondering when they're going to split up. They're tired. They're tired of opening the mailbox like there's a bomb inside, but it's a bill, and they don't know how they're going to pay it. They're tired of feeling sick and run down all the time when you said it's by the stripes of your Son, Jesus, that we're healed. They're tired of that, and they want His healing. So God, if we decide today that we've had enough of the old, if we can take that small step today, I've got a feeling that'll be enough. And then we'll take that step tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. And when we come back here next week, then we'll get step 2. We'll get step 2 next Sunday. But today, I'm grateful for those who will walk away from this place, who will turn off their computers, and they will make a decision. I've had enough, and I'm going to take a step in God's direction. God, be ready. I know you are, because we're coming, and we're coming to you. In Christ I pray.